What in God's grace is happening to the world today?
We have confronted the Russians about stopping their continued arms shipments to Syria.
From the current global economic crisis,
A reduction in the price of gasoline at the pump, Jenna, has the effect of like a tax cut for American consumers. It means they can buy their gasoline and then they have money left over to buy other things. The problem gets back to this issue of, are we in a global slowdown that's really now hitting the U.S. where factories are not producing as much? That's the real question, and that's the real fear I have, that we're just not seeing the output that we'd like to see for a sustained recovery.
to the beating drums of war.
China is playing a major role, helping Iran to develop an arsenal of missiles capable of hitting the United States.
Our children and our grandchildren.
I think the biggest threat we have to our national security is our debt. I was shown a figure the other day by the comptroller in the Pentagon that said the debt, I think it's in 2012, but the interest on our debt is $571 billion in 2012.
Our sons and daughters.
Good evening. Of all the time bombs in the American economy set to explode with dire consequences, this is a big one. Staggering debt from student loans. Everyone is told a college education is a way to get ahead. College tuitions, though, keep going up. So does the borrowing. And we just hit an awful milestone. Our nation's combined student loan debt has now hit $1 trillion.
More than 1,000 of you sent us your 3 words: graduates, drowning in debt, worried parents back in their old roles again. There was this graduate, nearly $25,000 in debt, just getting started, paying it off. This graduate, $78,000 in debt, will never end. And this young woman, $100,000 in debt. One recent survey of this year's college graduates revealed 85% saying they'd be moving back home. 5.9 million young adults, 25 to 34, now live at home, up 25% in just the last 4 years.
You can talk to people in this generation who find themselves in a place they never expected to be, 4, 5, 6 years out of school and back in the bedroom they had in high school.
Are we experiencing the culmination to the perfect storm?
International terrorism, nuclear proliferation, failing states, resource depletion, the security consequences of a changing climate. This is a world of diverse and evolving threats, all of which have a global dimension.
Now let's have a look at some news from mainstream media regarding the economy.
186,000 Americans filed for unemployment in the latest week. That number continues to go up, as we've seen over the last several weeks. Now take a look at the housing market. We have new news on foreclosure activity. Foreclosure activity jumped last month, up 9%. Big questions about the housing recovery and what's ahead. When we see numbers like this, and we keep on seeing numbers like this, Bob, one has to question what we're hearing about there being no new ideas presented by either side when it comes to the economy.
Just look at how our economy is tied to global events.
First of all, I'm a political atheist. I don't believe in anybody's political religion. I see things for what they are, not the way I want them to be. Right. So what I have to say has no political agenda behind it. When did things work the best? They worked the best when the Glass-Steagall Act was there.
I agree.
They worked the best before NAFTA. Our standard of living was much higher. Again, it's only the data. So when did it start to change? That's when the change started happening. So when I say look at the parallels, the crash of '29, the Great Depression, currency wars, trade wars, World War, the Panic of '08, the Great Recession / Depression. There's a depression going on in Greece, in Portugal, in Spain, in Ireland, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Hungary. There's depressions going on. We're in a severe recession here. This recovery, it's a paper recovery. Currency wars are already happening. Trade wars are heating up. Oh, and here's that nice one. How about Iran? You want another one? We'll keep it going.
All right, you're talking about Iran. You're talking about the fact that Iran, we are going to have a war. You think we're going to go to war and that it will cover up the financial problems that we have.
So let's hold that thought for just a minute. We'll come right back to this. Meet Russia's comrade, Iran's president, Mohammad Ahmadinejad, pictured on the left. This is what Russia's chief of staff has to say.
Well, Moscow has warned Washington against striking Iran. Russia's chief of staff revealed on Wednesday the US could attack Iran after wrapping up its campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. He claimed his American counterpart had told him about the possibility. In an exclusive interview to RT's Spotlight program, General Nikolai Makarov outlined Moscow's concerns.
Russia is not afraid of a possible U.S. attack on Iran. We're just trying to predict the consequences of such a move. This is an important issue for us, as Iran is located near our borders, and it worries us. Another issue is that Iranian society is highly politicized and spiritually strongly united, and the country has many supporters abroad.
You mean throughout the Middle East?
Yes, and such an attack on Iran could lead to explosive consequences throughout the region. That is our primary concern, explosive events in Iran and in nearby countries.
If I understand correctly what you said at Wednesday's news conference, Moscow is trying to warn the US against such a move?
That's correct. We've been warning against attack on Iran. Earlier, we warned of possible problems in Afghanistan, but no one listened to us. We hope that they will now listen and understand all the possible consequences of an attack.
Anyways, back to where we were.
The path is being laid out in front of us. History is repeating itself. Only the names and places have changed.
Tell me about this Iran situation again. So if we go to war with Iran, are you saying that it will cover up the financial problems because of the fact that the war machine will provide jobs, growth in various industries and so forth? Or are you talking about something much bigger?
Oh, much bigger, much different. Look, 7 of the last recessions, post-World War recessions, were preceded by spikes in oil prices. If we go to war against Iran, we're saying this is the beginning of World War III. You want to talk about a fragile recovery unraveling? That'll do it really nice. These aren't the Iraqis, these aren't the Libyans, these are the Persians. They've been around a real long time. There's 70 million of them, and they're not going anyplace. So what we're saying is if there's war, by the way, war has already been declared. An economic war has been declared by the Senate and signed by President Obama on New Year's Eve with the National Defense Authorization Act. The embargo is being put upon Iran. Again, another parallel, but a flip. Remember that in Japan, they cut the Japanese off from resources before World War II? The story they never talk about? Now they're stopping Iran from selling their resources. Oil production in Iran now is down at a 10-year low. So they're putting them out of business. They're building this, they're beating the drums of war.
So are you starting to see how everything is so tied together?
Well, it looks like China has been selling Iran its DF-31 missile, which has a range of 4,300 miles, which is just about enough to reach Alaska. Now, these reports are consistent with things that we know to be true, that Chinese enterprises have been sourcing materials and components for Iran's nuclear and missile programs, and also that China, despite repeated American pleas, allowed North Korea to use the Beijing airport to transfer missiles to Iran. By now, the evidence against China is overwhelming.
为什么强大的国家都会走向灭亡呢？古希腊、罗马帝国、不列颠帝国、美国，因为他们都犯同样的错误，与原来使得他们成功的原则背道而驰。美国政府企图以庞大的开支和税收来摆脱严重的经济衰退，巨额的所谓刺激开支。 庞大的医疗改革，政府接管私有企业，债务累累。当然，我们是他们的大债主。现在他们都得给我们干活。
Let's talk about the US dollar for just a minute.
This is billions of dollars. This is how much money do we print and have in the system at any given time. Let me start at 1929. Show me the... Here we go, 1929, here's the stock market crash, all right? Now, if you see, we were on the gold standard, so we couldn't print much more money. We had the stock market crash, but we didn't do all of the stuff that we're doing now, just printing money. Go ahead, step to the next thing. Then we go up to 1941. That's the Great Depression. Still haven't pumped a lot of money into the system because, again, on the gold standard. Then we have World War II, and we'll take this all the way to 1965. You'll see it comes up. We had two wars. We had World War II, and we also had the Korean War. In 1965, we were having the Vietnam War. But here's where it gets sticky, because we had all these wars, and we tried to dogpile on with the Great Society. Well, how are we going to pay for all that? Well, in 1971, Richard Nixon says, why don't we get rid of the gold standard? So that way, we can just print whatever we want. But we promise the rest of the world, oh, no, we'll never print too much. Really, we're good for it. I mean, look at our record here. We don't do that. Great Society kicks in, and look what happens. Next point, please. Look how we've devalued our money. This is up until 2000 when we have the Y2K scare, where everybody's like, bury your food and grab your cash. The computers are going down. That's why the government put this little spike here. If you see that little spike, goes up because they just dump a lot of cash into it, and then they bring it back in, they pull it back in. But it's difficult to pull things back in, especially when you have a horrible event like 9/11. Next stop is 9/11. You'll see it's just a little spike back up just a little bit. Remember how everybody was freaked out that the world was coming to an end? Do your patriotic duty, go spend, go out there and get into the stock market. Well, we did. And then this is the kind of spending we get. As you see here, the federal bailout's just about to begin. We're in, let me get into my Al Gore machine. Oh, it's a real inconvenient truth now, isn't it, Al? Look at this hockey stick. This is the hockey stick that Al Gore was talking about with the, you know, the woolly mammoth coming back or whatever the hell he's talking about. Here's where we were in September last year. But then the Treasury decided we need to start printing more money. This hockey stick should take your breath away. This is devaluing our money. You know, Al Gore said global warming is not a political issue, it's a moral one. Thomas Jefferson said doing this to our children is immoral, and I agree with him. We have pumped all of this money in and devalued our money. How is it not going to be worthless? This has never, ever been done by anybody ever before.
What happens to our baby boomer retirees?
Medicare is one of the biggest entitlement programs in the United States and is expected to run bone dry by 2020, while other less optimistic analysts claim it could be as early as 2015.
Starting on January 1st, more than 10,000 baby boomers will turn 65. And every day after that, for the next 19 years, another 10,000 boomers will reach retirement age. But unlike previous decades, those retiring next week are facing many uncertainties. First, most don't have pensions. Back in the 80s, nearly 39% of private sector employees held a guaranteed pension. A pension is where you're guaranteed a certain amount of money for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live. A lot of people don't even know what it is anymore, because today the number of people with pensions is only 15%.
We can't print our way out of this. Corporations can't print money to pay these people that they owe. It's another broken promise to our retirees. And oddly enough, the Fed is kind of responsible here because they've kept interest rates artificially low. It's been very difficult for these pension plans to make money. So this money is going to either come out of corporate profits, which is going to hurt the stock market, or it's going to come directly out of the pockets of retirees who have already facing higher food and fuel costs. So yes, it's a very big problem.
Wayne, how much should we be worried? We've been talking so much about Europe, so much about Greece. Are we looking in the wrong direction?
No, I think you have to be worried. You have to be worried any time when a worker or somebody says, I'm contributing into some sort of a retirement plan and I'm not going to get my money back.
In lieu of pensions, many retiring workers depended on stock market investments to fund their retirements. 401ks, IRAs, all those cool things that came along with the Reagan administration moving forward. But our stock market has been stagnant for a decade now, showing only a meager 4% growth. Not even keeping up with inflation, and retirees can't expect their homes to carry them through their later years either. Since the housing crash, the typical home has lost a third of its value. And nearly 11 million homeowners are underwater on their mortgages. They owe more than their home is worth. Looking at people ages 55 to 64, the oncoming boomers, those about to retire, those heading in that direction, 2/3 of them hold mortgage debts that average $85,000 or more. Not exactly the nest egg that they thought that they would have heading into retirement before this housing disaster and the massive theft by all the banksters. On top of all that, Thanks to our weak job market, many people on the verge of retirement have been unemployed an average of 45 weeks, which will force them to take early retirement at age 62, which then causes them to lose 25% of their benefits, Social Security benefits, for the rest of their lives. And with medical costs soaring, every little bit of money helps. The average 55-year-old today will need to have $187,000 in his or her checking account to cover medical expenses during retirement. So this is the snapshot of America right now as one of its most prominent generations is set to retire.
Whichever the case, Medicare is indeed in a dire situation. U.S. government-funded health care, which is made up of Medicare and Medicaid, makes up 23% of U.S. federal spending. That's approximately $793 billion, $528 billion of which was spent on Medicare alone. In fact, if you look more closely, we spend more on health care than on all discretionary spending combined, more than Social Security or defense. The total for federal spending in 2010 was $3.46 trillion. The total federal income was $2.16 trillion, which gives us a deficit of $1.29 trillion. So, when we are running a deficit, it means we have one of two choices. Either we keep on spending until we're bankrupt, or we reduce our expenditures. Unfortunately, the most substantial area where we can reduce expenditures is Medicare. Medicare is financed through a combination of payroll taxes, premiums, and general revenue. The problem is that spending has been growing faster than the economy has and is projected to accelerate dramatically over the next few years as enrollment in the program explodes and unit costs of medical treatment outpace inflation. Consider this. The first wave of baby boomers began to flood into the Medicare program in 2010 at the rate of 10,000 per day. That means by 2030, the Medicare population will nearly double to 76 million Americans and continue to expand to 88 million in 2040. That's triple the population of 2010. Spending per enrollee is projected to increase by 50% during the next decade. For example, in 1975, the cost per enrollee was $2,813. In 2010, it was $12,090. And by 2040, the average cost per enrollee will be a hefty $44,416 per year. Not surprisingly, Medicare is on the verge of implosion, especially since payroll tax revenue and premiums are not keeping pace with the program's increasing costs, and that's how we get the B word: bankruptcy. Analysts are projecting Medicare will go bankrupt sometime between 2015 and 2020.
Well, that just about covers all of today's global events. Thanks for tuning in, and if you like this video, please subscribe.